And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. As always, he is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. Colts Minicamp, Colts offseason, George. Slam the book shut. It is officially over. We are in summer vacation mode. All the Colts offseason activities, minicamp, all now in the books. And we now look ahead to the next time the Colts will be together. Will be the start of training camp in a few weeks. We got a lot covered here because this, just like the Colts, is going to be our last pod here. We're going to go on a little bit of a summer vacation until 6 weeks from now, roughly mid to late July, when training camp does get going again. Trust me, we'll be here plenty of times during the week. So if you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod, and also wherever you get your podcasts as well. But just a heads up for you, this would be the last pod we do here outside and of emergency pod, which George and I were just talking before. If we have an emergency pod between now and training camp, outside of a safety signing, maybe not the best circumstances. So pray they don't hear from us too much in this little 6-week gap, but a lot covered here in terms of Mitchell's fit right now, since we're able to see him on the field with Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately, speaking of safety, another reason why the Colts have to sign a safety came to fruition this week. And also, number 44, going to the Ring of Honor, Dallas Clark, now the latest member of that great Colts 2000s teams to go into Lucas Oil Stadium, go into the ring. So very excited about that. We'll get a lot to talk about. But George, come on. We got to start, unfortunately, with the more things change, maybe the more things stay the same. Would you believe this quiet off season would not go out so quiet? We have an injury concern with Anthony Richardson. He did not participate in the last day of minicamp. George, you were there. What do you have to report? What do you have to kind of take away from Anthony Richardson's shoulder soreness that we're hearing being downplayed by both AR himself and Shane Steichen?
Yeah, I think the first thing that everybody needs to realize is the practice he sat out was like 30 minutes. And there were more passes thrown by Kwity Paye, Blake Freeland, and EJ Speed than any of the quarterbacks at the end of that practice. So I think that's important to understand too. It wasn't a full practice. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly. We were a little distracted by what was going on with the starter. But I don't remember an 11-on-11 period happening during those 30 minutes. There was definitely 7-on-7, but I don't remember there being an 11-on-11 period. So it was last day of school. You know, I mean, that's how it is usually on veteran mini camp. And so if there was a day to just say, you know what, don't risk it, it's not worth it, that was that day. Even with that being said, one of the things that Anthony Richardson said repeatedly when he talked to media was, I didn't want to sit out today. You know, the trainers were saying, hey, this is what's best. I didn't want to do it because that's him. You know, it doesn't matter. If it's 30 minutes and he's going to throw 10 passes, he wants to throw 10 passes. It doesn't matter. But I think it was the right call. I mean, from all reports and from what we could see visually, just there was a little bit of soreness on Wednesday. And you could tell on Wednesday, he was – a lot of times between drills, he had those giant elastic bands that they kind of stretch out with. He was either, stretching one of those with both arms above his head, or he was working with an athletic trainer and just trying to do the like up and down. And there were a couple other times where he just sort of lean over and shake that arm. Like you could just tell it was just not comfortable. At that time, I didn't know if it was tight or if it was sore or what was going on, but you could tell it was an obvious discomfort. And he wasn't throwing the ball the way he wanted to. Like he was sailing a lot of throws and getting mad about it. Like you'd see him go back to the huddle and, yeah, I know I can do better than this. So I think that's what's going on in June. First of all, I don't think it's that surprising. I mean, he had shoulder surgery. This is the first month basically that he was throwing on a regular schedule, on a regular NFL schedule. He said it after practice yesterday, and I would agree with him 100%. It's more surprising that it only happened once in 12 practices than it did happen once. So I don't think that part of anybody who's gone through any kind of rehab, that's pretty normal. You're going to have that, especially early on when you're ramping back up and you're getting back into your normal routine. He said it's not the first time it's happened as far as like the soreness. Normally he just ices it up and goes right back at it. And that's what he wanted to do yesterday. Basically it was the trainers and the coaching staff who said, you know what? It's the last day of practice. We're going 30 minutes. Just don't push it. It's not worth it. And I think anytime when you've got soreness like that, or you've got tightness or whatever's going on, that's where you do turn something that's nothing into something bigger. If you go out there and you overdo it, and that's been the risk, I think, this whole time. The one concern I think since this whole rehab started was we all know Anthony well enough by now to know he's going to want to push it. Of course, he wanted to practice yesterday. He wants to take it to the limit. And I think, but he's been smart with it, and I think right now we asked him point blank, is this a setback? No. He said it's not. It's been he's had soreness to some degree since he started throwing. That was the expected result. It's going to be there. He's got to deal with, he's got to manage it. Their whole point right now isn't, hey, let's get him ready for the last mini camp practice in June. It's let's get him ready for 17 games starting in September. And that's what yesterday was all about in my mind.
All right, makes me feel a little bit better. When I saw your tweets yesterday and even the day before, make sure you follow George GM Bremer on Twitter. Does gives tremendous updates. I kind of joked with you, like, sure your mentions were definitely calm, cool, and collected. I texted you the GTA Grand Theft Auto meme of, since it's a family friendly show, we won't say it all, but bleep, here we go again. Because right there is, for this fan base, I think rightfully so, right, there is the scars of Peyton Manning on his neck. Obviously, Andrew Luck on his shoulder, right? Comes to quarterback injuries and it being downplayed, the seriousness of it early on, only to find out it's a way bigger problem than we thought. There is a history there, and right or wrong, fair or not, Colts trainers kind of get lumped into that where they lose the benefit of the doubt when it comes to an injury like this for Anthony Richardson. When you kind of look at the path and you hear previous similar statements of it's okay, it's not a setback, everything will be fine. And then come, week 10, they're nowhere to be found and the season's over. 1 to 10, George, if I had to ask you in this scenario here, your concern level, 1 obviously being the lowest, 10 being the highest, for Anthony Richardson's shoulder, let's say moving forward, what number would you say?
Probably about a 4, and it's all mostly because of the pass, because you just don't. I mean, anytime that you're hearing that, your 22-year-old quarterback has soreness in his throwing shoulder, it's not a 1. I mean, you're not ever going to be completely unconcerned with that. And also, I mean, look at what happened last year. I mean, he's out all but 4 games. So, there's going to be, until you see him out there, not even in training camp. I mean, obviously, if he's not practicing in training camp, that would be a massive red flag and it would go up, significantly. But right now, there's no reason to believe that'll be the case. In fact, he said he'll be at whatever get together they have this summer with the offense, throwing with the receivers wherever they end up going. Sounds like it might be more West Coast this year because Michael Pittman kind of gave in last year and went to Florida, and this year it may be the other way. But that stuff's not going to be covered. So you're going to have to take their word on that. The first practice of training camp, I'm sure that all eyes will be on him. They would have been anyway, but I'm sure they'll all be on him now. But the real thing is the season, because even if he goes through all of training camp and never misses a practice like he didn't last year, and well, I guess he missed a couple with the nose and things like that, but never misses a practice for unknown reasons, and is completely not seen on the field, which I think is another thing that didn't happen here. In the past, those other circumstances you were talking about, the quarterback was a rumor. You were told they were somewhere on the premises. There was no sign of them. I remember it being a big deal the year Peyton Manning was going through the neck injury, and in training camp when he was they used to do, I forget what they called it, a mock game that they would play when they were here at Anderson University. They would play out on the main field, where the football team plays there. And we hadn't seen him all training camp long. And that Saturday he was on the sideline, and that was, didn't have a uniform on. But just him being on the sideline was a big deal. And it was a similar thing to Luck in both 2017 and 2019. 2017, they had a joint practice with the Lions at their facility. That's where training camp was that year. And we hadn't seen him the entire training camp. And he came out to say hi to Matt Stafford. And that was a massive, like, it's Andrew Luck, he's here. In 2019, it was in and out. Like he obviously started training camp that year before shutting things down, and you wouldn't see him at all. Like he wouldn't be on the field, and that got progressively more and more like that. Richardson literally wasn't throwing. Everything else he was doing. He was out there during stretching. He was doing the same thing he's doing, listening to his song playing over the loudspeakers. I think it's funny, his rap song. Um, and then he was doing dropbacks. He just, instead of releasing the ball, he would just kind of mimic that motion, or he'd throw it left-handed a couple times. But that's why, I don't have the same level of concern right now that I did with the others, because he was here. It wasn't a question of like, is he in the Netherlands getting like, unique treatments? He was there. He was doing everything in practice except throwing. And even Wednesday, when he didn't run the final drill, he was with the other quarterbacks right behind the line of scrimmage, and he had a towel in his hand. And every time a play would go good or bad, he's waving that towel and either celebrating or in frustration. I don't think they'd let him do that if there was serious concern about, what was going on inside his shoulder.
You said 4. I'm going to go even lower. I'm going to go 1. Like right now, as you sit here, we're recording this on June 7th. 6 weeks from now, if we're still talking about it, different story. But right now, June 7th, I'm going to say my concern level is a 1 out of 10 for a few reasons. Number one, like you said, that the third and final mini camp practice, and we'll put even practice in air quotes, was 30 minutes last day of school. Everyone knows the last day of school, you're not doing anything. You're there, you're hyped, hopped up, the energy's there. You're basically there. Say goodbye to your friends, goodbye to your teachers. That's a half day, most likely, at least in my case. And then you're out of there. The summer's here. So there's no point to push it. That's number one. And number two, you said it. Anthony Richardson said it himself as well. It's normal. Like, think about it. Anyone, like, when you have shoulder surgery and you're not throwing a football, I would argue probably this was the longest period of time from October to what was it, March or April when he first threw a football again. And Stephen Holder had that great story, kind of talking him down in Florida. Let's just call it April, because I forgot off the top of my head. From October to April. That is probably, George, I'm going to go to venture, the longest time he's gone without throwing a football at least once in his life since, what, 4th grade, and maybe even earlier than that. So it makes sense, like when you're used to doing something, it takes such a long layoff, and all of a sudden now you're ramping back up. It makes sense. Like, I'll speak for myself. I didn't go to the gym once last week. I went this week. My body 3 days later is still sore, and that's just a week. So like it makes like it the human body, like it, even though he is just chiseled like a god, it does make sense that if you are trying to work your way back in after taking such an extended break, you are going to be sore. It is normal. And I also am encouraged by the fact that Richardson said he's kind of surprised that it took this long to be sore. Like, I just think, to me, it makes sense. Again, 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, if we're in, preseason game mode and we're 2 or 3 weeks away, and we're still talking about, he doesn't feel great and maybe his throws are affected still by that shoulder. It's not all there. Different story. But right now, going into summer vacation, and like you said, seeing him on the sideline, seeing his demeanor not change whatsoever. He is someone that, I don't want to say he shows his emotions on his sleeve. That's not it. But I think with him still being young, like if that shoulder, I'll say this, if that shoulder is a problem with what we know about Anthony Richardson, I would have a hard time saying he's talking to the media or still being as positive if that was an actual real concern. I think we would have seen even slightly different body language or a different tone from AR when he was talking to you, or just how he was acting, in the final practices when he wasn't taking reps, if this was actually serious. So I pray, George, I'm not getting bamboozled again, and having the wool pulled over my eyes for the third time when it comes to a quarterback injury. But for right now, going into basically, we'll call it summer vacation, shoulder soreness, I'll put my concern level 1 out of 10. I'm not right now that concerned.
Yeah, that last point is a really good one, because he is, when he's frustrated, you can tell, like the energy is different, because he is such an upbeat guy and he is always so positive and so excited. And you could tell even after the injury happened, when he first started coming back to practice and he was in the sling, he looked sad, for lack of a better word. He looked like he wanted to be on the field, and because of course he did. But it was very obvious. You didn't have to talk to him. You didn't have to study him. It was his body language, everything about him was screaming, this sucks, and I wish I could change the circumstances. There was none of that, Wednesday or Thursday. A little bit of frustration and, you know, not wanting to sit out Thursday and wishing that things were going a little bit better Wednesday for him. But that's a whole different conversation
Right.
than worrying about the structure, damage of that shoulder. And I agree with you. Like, as far as this incident itself goes, my concern level probably is a 1. For me, it's more just the terrible luck that this franchise has had that raises it to a 4. Because you just see things have snowballed. There's no reason to believe that'll happen here. Each of these cases has been, unique and its own thing. And it's important to remember Andrew Luck didn't retire because of the shoulder. That wasn't what ultimately ended his career. In fact, he came back in 2018 and played a really excellent season and had expectations very high for 2019 after the shoulder. So it wasn't the shoulder that did it. And I think so. We'll see where this goes, but my concern level will go up, when we start hearing that he's in Europe or, he's off, and we'd start asking what state he's in during pressers and things like that. Right now, like you said, everything about this right now is just normal load maintenance. That's what they call it in the NBA, load management.
Right. If he's on a plane, forget to California. If he's on a plane going the other way to Europe, yeah, I'm concerned. I am definitely
Mhm.
concerned. That would be for sure. One thing though, George, I was encouraging this week is kind of look at the positive here which was when AR was on the field early on in minicamp. It looked like he had a pretty good connection early on with a nice young Colts rookie and AD Mitchell. What'd you see early on?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the interesting thing. The other like health issue out there was Michael Pittman, who a couple of weeks ago banged knees. We already talked about that, and hasn't come back in. Again, that's mostly precaution, just because why. But I think the blessing in disguise of that is that Mitchell got a lot more work with the ones than maybe he was normally going to get, because now you're down a guy. And then Alec Pierce also this week had his foot stepped on and he was out at least the last 2 practices. Also not a major thing, but something that he wasn't. So now all of a sudden, AD Mitchell got a lot more work. And that's probably good in a long run, because now he was, sort of a crash course in chemistry with both Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, the important elements here. And I think it's important too to note that everybody from the coaching staff to his teammates had nothing but glowing reports on how Richardson looks in practice. Obviously more comfortable. He knows the playbook. He knows his teammates better. He just, it's a difference between walking into the NFL for the first time as a rookie and now, knowing people in the building, knowing what the practice schedule is going to be like. You see all of that from him when he's out there on the field. Mitchell was one of the probably most vocal, most memorable, uh, like positive reviews of the quarterback. You see, he does things out there I've never seen a quarterback do before. Called him a creative player, called him a freak. Um, I think it's good to see early on, these 2 young guys who have really high potential, really just loads of natural physical gifts. For them to, one, be such big fans of one another already, but 2, to already start seeing that translate on field now, shorts and helmets and all the normal caveats this time of year. It's not, there's no pass rush, there's no press coverage. They weren't game planning for him, but you see the reasons people get excited about AD Mitchell because of that natural athleticism, catches almost everything in his zip code, can do a little bit of everything you want a wide receiver to do. I think AR said yesterday, he's got a lot of wiggle to him. And I think that's probably the best, explanation I've heard, but it's the speed's there. He can go up and make the contested catch if he needs to. I don't think there's anything you ask of a wide receiver that it doesn't seem like AD Mitchell can do. So, the big question, of course, as it is with Richardson now, is can you take all of that's on paper and all the reason to get excited and, put it out there on the field for 17 weeks? That's obviously the question for everybody in the league right now. I think AD Mitchell was probably quote unquote star of the offseason work that we saw. Granted, there were 12 practices, and counting the 3-day minicamp, we were at 5 of them. So, who knows what was happening the other 7 days. But from what we saw, it looked really like a guy who is on top of things.
And that's exciting because like we talked about, he was drafted on day 2. Like he slipped down. There was, we'll say, character concerns that Chris Ballard is very upset about. But like he didn't drop to the second round because of athletic ability or explosiveness or nose for the end zone. And so it's exciting. Again, early on, like you said, a lot of caveats, but at least early on, it's good to see that those traits are translating to the field. And it's like you see like last year at Texas, and you see on paper, like the AR strengths and AD strengths match up perfectly, because this is a guy who had 11 touchdowns at Texas last year. And how he got those, I think 11 touchdowns is important, because he's not one of those guys like his teammate Xavier Worthy, where, hey, you just throw him a screen and he can do the rest. He can take it 65 yards by himself for a touchdown, just outrun everybody. He is fast and athletic, but he's also a big body where a lot of his damage is done down the field. And you look now at Anthony Richardson in the short sample size we got last year, a lot of the biggest plays he made was extending plays and then pushing the ball down the field. So like, I'm already dreaming here, George, of like situation where you could get Anthony Richardson scrambling out of the pocket, looking downfield. There's AD Mitchell kind of just going to be taking a slant route or, a dig route, and then just taking it up, and 50, 60 yards on the run. We see hopefully that connection AR to AD for what could be a ton of explosive touchdowns here in 2024. It's good to hear that they're already seemingly on the same page and getting comfortable with each other, because on paper, their games complement each other perfectly.
Yeah, they're a really good match on paper. And I thought, Mitchell was really interesting in talking about, somebody asked him, like, how do you work on that chemistry? How do you, specifically on scramble drills, how do you get on the same page? And he said he thinks it just happens naturally. But I think that's why this time of year is so important, because a lot of that really is the kind of stuff you're talking about, knowing kind of instinctively what the other guy is going to do, having an understanding of he's going to cut this up. I know that's what he wants to do in this situation. Or, Mitchell understanding if, Richardson's rolling in a certain direction, where is it easiest for him to put the ball? Where does he want to throw it? And I think a lot of that comes from reps together on the field, but also a lot of it comes from just interpersonal relationships, getting to know each other, in the locker room, and, hanging out off the football field. A lot of that adds up to these kind of improvisational things that you're talking about. And I think that's why it's good to see that they're already connecting on a lot of different levels, because I think that's the most important element in this. I thought that's why it happened kind of early on with Pittman last year. You could tell, he had an ability to, Pittman's always been good in the scramble drill anyway. I mean, that was his best season prior to last year, was with Carson Wentz, where a lot of that was going on. Play would break down and he would kind of run to the open space. T.Y. Hilton was always really good about going and finding, a window somewhere in the defense when things broke down. Mitchell seems to have that sort of knack. Pittman's got it. Josh Downs has it. Those are really encouraging things when you got a quarterback who can extend plays. And I think, in Alec Pierce's case, just keep running down the field, because I think no matter where you get, you're never going to run too far for Richardson to get the ball to you.
That's also very true. That's a luxury all these receivers have. If you go deep, for the most part, it's not a bad option. I think AR has, whether rolling left or right, he'll be able to get it down there for you. That is for sure. But very exciting, kind of already see the early seeds being planted for what should be a really fun on paper combo, AR to AD. Hopefully we'll see it early and often here in 2024. So I guess we're kind of doing a little bit of a yo-yo here. We start off with some negative news with AR's shoulder injury, although we both are not very concerned, but still, hey, it's a storyline. Some positive, AD Mitchell's explosiveness and early signs of showing some impressive plays. Back down to negative, George, because the other news we got, injury-wise at least, Daniel Scott. Now, there's a lot of concern here because, unfortunately, unlike AR, we know his injury and is very severe. Torn Achilles, roughly about a year after he tore his ACL. This George, this just on a personal note, you feel so bad for him. I mean, 2 years in the league, 2 years even unable just to make it to training camp. Just heartbreaking here. Daniel Scott now out for the second year in a row, this time torn Achilles. Woof.
And the guy who, again, by all reports, was shining in OTAs. And two practices we saw him in, he picked off Richardson in one of them, which he's always couldn't, get raise an eyebrow. Yeah, I mean, fifth round pick, somebody that the franchise really likes. They really feel like, this is a guy who has potential, can really help them out, and can't even get to training camp. Is just, I can't imagine his level of frustration right now. Because to go through that back to back, and like you said, it was pretty much the same time of year. I mean, you're talking about a week, maybe less apart as far as when we heard neither injury happened in a practice that was open, so we can't pinpoint it and say it was exactly this day. But as far as when the news broke, within just a week at most of each other, it's just unbelievably bad, to go through back to back and at a position that probably is the most concerning position on the field right now for this team. I mean, you want to look at the 22 starting spots on offense and defense. That's probably the one you put the biggest red flag on going into training camp. And I don't want to overplay Scott's role in that. He was in competition to start. There's no question about that. But Nick Cross has taken the vast majority of the first team reps that we've seen. Now, lots of caveats there too. They rarely rotate much with the first team in training camp they do it in training camp. They don't do it very often in the OTAs because again, you're not getting a lot of different looks. They're installing things. It's classroom stuff. It's I think it was Kenny Moore who called it classroom on the grass, class on the grass,
I like
which is
that.
basically what they're doing, this time of year. Starting to ramp it up a little bit at veteran minicamp, but it's not, you're not even really like running that many dummy plays and things, it's just sort of the basics. Here's where you need to line up and, look at your keys and doing things like that. So, and it's clearly just a passing camp, which for free safety is a big deal. But you're not tackling, you're not, you're not even really thudding up that much. But he was part of that mix, and he's somebody that I think that was going to at least have a role in that defense, if not, does he come in on a dime? Does he come in a nickel? Does he come in? But now you're down to Cross and Thomas, and they had another depth safety, Michael Tootsie, not sure yet what it was. Could have just been a cramp or, not, it obviously wasn't season ending because they didn't move him to IR like they did Daniel Scott. But the day they announced the Scott injury, he got banged up. So depth there was a concern to begin with. You've lost one guy from the mix completely. Tootsie got banged up. So, there's another guy competing for that depth role. It's just, if there was one position that you would go into this spring saying, that can't happen at, free safety was probably right top of the list.
I think you make a really good point of this injury is not going to now force Chris Ballard to go make a move, right? We talked about before, you have to go. We both believe, well, I'll speak for myself. I believe at least if you're Chris Ballard, you cannot sit tight here between now and day one of training camp without signing a safety. Now, patience is on his side because right now, for all the big names on the safety market, no one's been signed for the most part. So there's still a lot of big names, still a lot of good players out on the market. And now, especially with everyone kind of going their separate ways, there's no reason to sprint to try to sign a safety, let's say tomorrow. You can wait till, right up to training camp, maybe even early on in training camp, to try to get someone. So the urgency per se to get it done today is not there, but I think just this increases moreover in general, you got to get someone. You got to get someone here that can not only just be a body, but you compete and either push Nick Cross and or Rodney Thomas, or just take the the starting job, just take it outright, you know? And this just hurts that competition, hurts the numbers game as well. Again, this is not now. Chris Ballard wasn't planning, at least in my opinion, wasn't going and okay, we have Daniel Scott, so we don't need a safety. I think he was kind of looking at it all along, and we know him, he's a very calculated, patient guy. So it's not surprising that up to this point, even with it being a concern that we haven't seen a signing. But I think this just hammers home again. Like you said, I'm with you. This is by far the most unsettled position, probably the most concerning position right now going to training camp in terms of depth and talent. I think just kind of reinforces the need at some point this offseason between now and training camp. I mean, Justin Simmons would be my dream. I'm sure a lot of fans would agree with that in terms of trying to get a big name here to plug in right away. But someone up to that level, I think, has to be signed now after this Scott injury, just to get some bodies in here and hopefully reinforce what is the biggest question mark going into training camp.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question this is the biggest area. I'm just not sure it's going to be a name that really rings any bells for people. We'll see. They've got to sign someone. I mean, there's no question. But
So you would say, sorry, if they sign someone, you would assume it's more depth than, let's say, competition to start.
That's the vibe I'm getting, and we'll see. You never know.
Okay.
That's the vibe I'm getting right now. Not the way I would go, but that's the way that it feels like it's headed, and we'll see, when things come around. But they absolutely, I mean, just the numbers themselves right now make it pretty necessary to bring somebody in at that position and see what they can do. I do think, it's going to be interesting to see how things go with Nick Cross, because he's a guy they traded up for, to draft initially. There was so much excitement around him his rookie year, during preseason and early in the year. And then, talking with Gus Bradley, it sounds like it was a communication thing as much as anything. They just didn't feel like he was connected enough on the back end, with his teammates. And so that's one of his strengths. It still is. And that's how he kind of initially took that and ran with it. And then there was a lot of promise around him, the rest of that rookie year going into last year. I think there was really a lot of feeling like Rodney Thomas could ascend and he could, take over that spot. He had 4 interceptions, I think, as a rookie. There was a lot of reason to think, hey, the arrow's pointing in the right direction. And then last year, the forward motion didn't happen for Thomas. And, at the end of the year, Nick Cross gets back in there. So I think both of them are still young enough. They're both interesting players, and that there was promise and excitement about both of them at different points. They both have unique strengths. I think both of them have a chance to have a breakout year, but that's why I would go your way. I mean, you bring somebody in here who can push them and could possibly take that starting job, you might unlock that next level from them. I think their plan right now, though, is they want to see more from both of them. And I think it's more likely that someone will come in to compete, but it'll be somebody more in that Daniel Scott level, somebody else who's in that group with them, who's hungry, who can push them. I would go the other way, and they might. You never know. I mean, a lot can happen. It's a long off season from this point on. That summer, a lot can happen. But right now, the vibe I'm getting is that it probably won't be, somebody that the fan base, let's put it this way, won't be somebody that we're probably going to do an emergency pod for.
That's like, you just look at it like the secondary position overall. And it's like, if you just assume, because most times, right, you're going to play with 3 DBs, 2 safeties, you're going to have 5 secondary members on the field in most cases in this modern day NFL. And right now, if you don't bring in someone that can that's a veteran that could start right away, and it's more depth, like you're saying, well, you look at the 5 guys, then you feel good about Julian Blackmon. You feel good about Kenny Moore. That's it. So the majority of the secondary, 3 out of 5, in a league, in a conference where the quarterbacks are only getting better and more talented and more are incoming into your division and into your conference, you can't go into a season trying to compete to win the division for the first time in a decade and have 3 of the 5 guys in the secondary be question marks. It could work out like the offensive line did last year, but it's a big game. Like, it's a big gamble to take and an unnecessary risk when there are guys out there you can bring in to shore it up and not only make you feel good about the secondary overall, but also if you have a strength of, okay, 3 of the 5 guys you feel good about and there are veteran leaders in there, well, it makes then the 2 outside corners that are going to be, Juju Brinson. I mean, we'll probably see a combination of Jalen Jones, Dallas Flowers, or we'll see a good mix there, I'm sure, and those guys play, but all of them are inexperienced. It makes them, them better, and it makes their transition easier. If you have 3 other guys around them, you feel pretty damn good about.
No question. As far as corner goes, too, Jones seems to have the upper hand right now, but
Okay.
that also Flowers is coming off an Achilles. So, yeah, you don't that's a major factor in that competition right now that you're not going to push him this time of year. That would be insane. Somebody else pointed out, I think true, when it comes to the safety position in particular, free safety is a major question mark. But even at strong safety, Julian Blackmon, when he's out there, is outstanding. Probably had his best year of his career last year, but he hasn't finished the season. So, if he gets injured again or even misses a game or two, both safety spots are a pretty big question mark. I think that's really another factor here that, just to kind of piggyback on what you were just talking about.
It's a good point. You're right about that, right? The one guy you feel good about, right, has had struggles staying healthy, and it's not a coincidence, too. He gets hurt down the stretch of the season. All of a sudden,
Mhm.
especially week 18, at home playoff game on the line, division on the line, you get torched by CJ Stroud in that offense. Yeah, I'm with you there. I hope a big name, I hope a big name is made. And if so, we will be here for an emergency pod. So make sure you should be subscribed. YouTube, wherever you get your pods, Blue Horseshoe Pod. All right, so mini camp is in the books, George. The Colts off season is in the books. Last thing we'll wrap up here is a fun one, because we also learned this week that number 44, Dallas Clark, going to the Ring of Honor. Mark your calendars, October 20th against the Dolphins. Dallas will be honored. I am very excited, George. I think it's also fitting, too, like when you look at the guys from that, 2000s team, mid-2000s teams, obviously, right, Peyton, Edge, Reggie, Marvin, Freeney, Mathis, Jeff Saturday, Tarklin, all up there. I think it's fitting that, at least on the offensive side, one of the last guys, was one of the glue guys for this team, Dallas Clark, going up there. Very excited to see 44 be honored here in October.
Yeah, I mean, he's first, I think, in franchise in receptions for a tight end and touchdown catches for a tight end. And, it's his impact was huge. And we always talk about obviously Reggie and Marvin Harrison, Edgerrin James, Harrison and Edger in the Hall of Fame. But Dallas Clark's also what sort of takes that offense to that next level and made them, so hard to defend. He had so many different weapons out there. And Clark was one of those guys who I think he was Jim Irsay said it, in the release when they were announcing this. He was at the forefront of sort of with that modern usage of the tight end. Iowa guy, so maybe that's why my mind goes right to George Kittle, but that's sort of the guy that I always remember of, because he could do it all. It wasn't just, he was a weapon catching the ball. He was a weapon, with the ball in his hand after the catch, but he was also a blocker. He would get in there and mix it up. And I think that's George Kittle to me is the biggest comparison between him, like in today's game. But I think Clark was one of those guys that was at the forefront of, what you see now with the top tight ends in the league and how they're used.
And two, like you said, it's like, not only did he have a well-rounded game, blocking, catching, but it's also like, I felt like him and Peyton had shared the same brain. Like they just knew, kind of going back to when you're talking about of like Anthony Richardson and AD Mitchell trying to get on that same page, just knowing where the other should be. I mean, Peyton and Dallas had that for their entire careers, where anytime Peyton was in trouble or was a big third down, you trust someone. Like it always felt like he knew or he was going to go to Dallas. And it felt like anytime there was questions, always a play breaking down, right place, right time. Oh, there's Dallas Clark right where he should be every time. The play that sticks out of my mind, at least number one here at Dallas Clark, is the little one-hand waiter touchdown catch on the back of the end zone against the Ravens. Thing of beauty. That was, I'm very excited about him. He's, I would say, again, a glue guy. Not the sexiest name on that team, but championship teams need someone like Dallas Clark who does it all, doesn't complain. Just anytime you call his number, he makes the right play. That's it. Doesn't have to be the flashiest play, but he makes the right play every time. And I'm really happy that, again, not only is he getting honored, but I think it's also fitting that he's one of the last guys as well to kind of round out that those great teams. But speaking of which, George, should he be the last guy from those mid 2000s teams? I mean, everyone else, Tarek Glenn, we basically mentioned everyone for the most part that helped contribute to the Super Bowl, and were a large part of the great run the Colts had from basically called '03 to 2009. Is there anyone else you think on that team that we should see honored as well, or is Dallas kind of the capper here, you think?
I mean, it's a big year for Hawkeyes in Indianapolis, right?
Yes.
Especially Hawkeyes who wear double-digit numbers and have the last name of Clark. But like sticking close to that theme, I think Bob Sanders is got to be mentioned. I mean, he might be the most unique player from that era in that everything around him. I mean, he was maybe the most violent defender ever to wear a Colts uniform, but that worked against him sometimes as much as it worked for him. It was defensive player of the year. You don't win the Super Bowl without him, but it was a short career, especially here in Indy. And, a lot of the time he wasn't out there. When he was out there, though, even on a defense with Freeney and Mathis, he might have been the most important guy when he was out there. I don't know. To me, he's one of the most interesting cases because I can't think of anybody else in the league. People always want to bring up Shaq Leonard and Andrew Luck alongside him because I think those three are the guys like, man, if they had stayed healthy, if you had like a full healthy career from those three, you're talking about all timers. But I don't think he's really the other two guys. Luck and Leonard didn't have the team success that Sanders had. Um, Leonard's the only one of those two that comes even close as far as like individual awards, being an all pro pretty much every year until he got hurt. Um, and obviously Luck's numbers are, when he was out there, when he was able to play, he still has, and he's like the youngest player, the fastest to 30,000 yards, whatever. Like he was, most passing yards for the first 3 seasons, things like that. His numbers were incredible. But Bob Sanders, to me, even amongst that trio, stands out as if you could take one of them and give them like a full healthy career, we're probably talking about him in Canton. We're talking about him, as an all-time safety. I honestly feel like if he could have played a regular career that you see from a guy as his standard and been healthy, he'd be right there. I mean, you'd be talking about him with the top safeties, ever. But unfortunately, not the way it played out for him, and you just got flashes of it instead.
He's so tough. If I was Jim Irsay, I wouldn't put him in. This is no disrespect to Bob Sanders. Not trying to take away anything he's done. For me, it's really twofold. Number one, I want the bar to be high. Now we could talk about guys already in there and the precedent. I just don't want to water it down by letting questionable players into what is supposed to be like the highest honor for an individual team you possibly could have. Ring of Honor, your name's in the stadium for the rest of time. And the thing with Bob Sanders is you're right. Like he was the heart and soul of that defense for sure. Freeney, Mathis, right, were tremendous off the edge, but he was the heart and soul. The issue for me is he just didn't play enough. When he played, he was great. But it's like you look at his 7 years with the Colts, he played in double-digit games, George, out of those 7 years twice. And it's not like, okay, well, he played in 14, then he got 9 and 8 and 9 and 8. He played 14 games in 2005, 15 games in 2006. I'm sorry, 2007, he played 15 games. And then the next closest amount of games he played was 6. So he's basically missing, I know it's not equal math because it's 16 games back then, and soon will be at 18, but he's basically missing 2/3 of every other year that he played with the Colts. He was great. He was the heart and soul, and I would probably agree they don't win the Super Bowl without him being back healthy for that Super Bowl run in '06. But if you're going to go in the Ring of Honor and have your name up there for the rest of time, I got to have you play in more games than Bob Sanders did. It's not his fault. Like I said, he was super talented, and that violent nature he played with got him recognized and won him a Defensive Player of the Year, but also kept him out for a large part of his career. I just think I wouldn't put him in if I was Jim Mercer. I just think for me, the lack of playing time just prevents that from happening. It's a tough decision though. It really is.
That's why I think he's the most unique guy in there, though, because it is the extremes there are so extreme. When he's on the field and he's healthy, he was as good as it gets, but he was off the field so much. It's just I can't think of anybody else on that polar opposite end. I mean, with Luck, is only at the end of his career where he didn't play, and
Right.
same with Leonard. Like this, like you said, 7 years in Indy, and only two of them do you play not all 16 double digit games.
Right.
It's a really, I just think he's the most interesting, unique of all the possible candidates. And then when you look beyond that era, one guy that I wonder about, if Bob Sanders isn't the next guy in, and if you say, okay, that era of Colts football, we're kind of closing the book on it. We've is T.Y. Hilton next in line? Would he be the next guy up?
I think you'd have to be, right? Because you look at production, longevity, like Luck. I'll be honest, I have not made a decision about Luck. Like that, like I go back for me, because you brought up Shaq Leonard too. I am more inclined to put Luck in over, like if you're saying you only got to pick one of the two, I would put Luck in over Shaq. But I think for me, T.I. is above both of them just because, unlike unfortunately the other two, he was around longer. Now, again, I know he also had injury concerns as well, and he was playing through some things, but like, especially in that time when he was drafted and where he was with Luck, like, I mean, that team, looking back, that team had nothing outside of Luck and really outside of him offensively. For the most part, outside of Anthony Costanzo, that team had nothing. And to still be able to go to the lengths that they did in terms of for 3 straight years, getting deeper in the playoffs for 3 consecutive seasons, he was a big reason for it. I mean, they should put his 13 up in the rafters in Houston for how much he just torched them every single year. But in terms of Ty, I would agree. Like in terms of the next guy, I think he's the one. I like that. I think you're right about that.
That's just my feeling. Like if you're not going to go Sanders, I think the next guy in line would be T.Y. Hilton in my mind. Longevity, the fans love him. I mean, he's right there, probably with Reggie Wayne in terms of like the most beloved Colts, across the fan base. And honestly, just the clown mask alone should get him in the Ring of Honor.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, everyone, right? Usually, for the most part, they have their the number, the name, and the years they played, right, with the Colts. Forget the number 13. Just put the ghost emoji. Or I like that. Maybe the ghost emoji on one side, instead of the years played, just the picture of him on the clown mask on the other, and in the middle is T.Y. Hilton. That would be, I think, very fitting to kind of have his name in the Ring of Honor that way.
Yeah, there's no question. That just came to me there as I thought, who would you put in next? And I would put in Bob Sanders just because I think he was he's just off the charts when he was out there. But I think there's a legit argument to say he didn't play enough. I would not say that to his face, by the way. I would not tell 100%. Him that.
There's a reason why he's not on the podcast right now. And we're telling us you are right. If Bob Sanders, if I'm Jim Mercer, he knocks on my door and say, "Hey Jim, can I be in?" You got it, Bob. Well, you picked the game. We'll put you right up there. No problem. You are spot on about that. Oh boy. But very excited. That's gonna be a really fun day. Also a really good game too. Colts Dolphins. That should be a track meet. So kind of I guess fitting that Dallas Clark is going to go in on a day where offense should be prominent as well. So a fun day. Mark your calendars. October 20th. Dallas Clark, a Ring of Honor. Put that 44 up there. Should be a really fun day as well to see not just him, but also so many of his Colts teammates back in Lucas Oil Stadium yet again. All right,
those so we told you fun days. Always fun days when you get those Ring of Honor things and all the guys come back and I don't think Reggie enjoys them as much as he used to though, because now he's got to coach.
That's
he's
true.
got a job to do that day. He used to be able to just go in the suite and party with everybody. Now he's got to be out there working.
He's got halftime adjustments to make, George.
Yep.
It's a whole different no time. Now, will we get because when Peyton, right, it was when Peyton Manning, I think it was when Jeff Saturday went in, I believe, if I get this right, Peyton Manning took one last snap with him under center. Do we get one last touchdown pass, Peyton to Dallas Clark?
I mean, we could. It seems fitting. It would seem like a good way to kick that off. I forgot to. I mean, there are a couple more things I guess we should mention before we go really quick, like add-on notes. One, they have sold out the season ticket allotment, which I can't remember the last time that happened. We were trying to talk about that in the media room. I think it might have been like 2014, 2015, sometime around there, when the luck era was still building and gaining steam. So that says something about the interest in the fan base. And they've started a new wait list, the Forever Blue wait list for the season tickets. So if you want season tickets 2025 and beyond, you can go to Colts.com and join that wait list. The other really quick, just kind of bookkeeping thing, we knew they were doing joint practices with the Cardinals and the Bengals. We were guessing what days those would be. They are official now. The Cardinals practice will be August 14th and August 15th at 6 p.m. at Westfield at Grand Park. The Bengals practice in Cincinnati will be August 20th at 2:15 p.m. So full training camp schedule is not out yet. That should come sometime in the next couple of weeks. And obviously when that comes out, all those practices, including the joint practices with the Cardinals, you can get free tickets at Colts.com for that as well.
Good call, because those are always the best days to go to training camp if you can make it. So mark your calendars, because those are gonna be 3 fun days. And hey, if you want to take a little summer road trip, go down to Cincy, nice and easy. Now, Bengals, we put it maybe not in the middle of the day. I mean, geez. But anyway,
15.
yeah, put your hat on, George. Put your suntan lotion on. It's gonna be a hot one there.
Yeah.
My goodness, right underneath the highway over there, which always does crack me up. All right, George. So we're about to head out summer vacation. Any summer fun plans? What we got cooking between now and training camp? Anything fun? Where we going?
Heading down to our yearly trip to Florida. We got friends down there. So, we'll head down there around the 4th of July and then just try to rest up as much. It's been a busy off season, between Purdue going to the Final Four and then the draft, there was somebody picked here that they've talked about a little bit in the WNBA. It's been a very busy spring. So got some fever home games that I will hit up every now and again. T.Y. Hilton will be there, by the way. He's there at every game. So another reason to put him in the Ring of Honor, supporting his other athletes here in Indy, even after he's retired. But yeah, just trying to relax a little bit and get ready for what promises to be a pretty interesting training camp this year.
Absolutely. Yes. Year 2, Anthony Richardson, JT back. So how about that? A training camp practice with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor on the field at the same time. Before then, ready for this? Going to Italy. George, you ever been?
I want, that's on my bucket list. Like I really want to go to Italy. So I'm jealous.
I will give you some recs, but pasta. Oh, I can't wait. Pasta every day, 3 times a day. Let's go. I have pasta every day as it is. So now to have it fresh, may come back speaking Italian on the pod.
Closest I got, we had Italian food in London, and it was like actual Italians because they had just set up in Italy. So like that, but not actually in Italy. And yeah, that would be Colts need to like play in Rome or something.
I was gonna say, I mean, we're talking about all these destinations, and now Brazil is gonna be the one. How have we not gotten it? Let's get in the Coliseum. Come on.
Yeah. Right. You're playing Rome. There's got to be a soccer stadium over there somewhere big enough to host an NFL game, right?
Sheesh, you think the Italians love some American football here? Maybe I'll spread the word when I'm there, right? And I'll try to cultivate a Colts fan base.
Lay the groundwork.
I'll be working. Look at that. Even on vacation, I'll be working to spread the word.
All you gotta do is wear that horseshoe around. People will see that. They'll be so impressed. Like this team needs to come and play here.
That's true. Jim, I'm doing the work for you. All right. So get a new international city. Get ready to claim Italy, the entire country. Forget a city. The entire country will be yours, and I'm done with it. So
the whole boot.
Yeah. Even Sicily. Well, so that'll do it for this edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. That's going to do it here again for us for the next few weeks. So we're going to take a little bit of summer break. Like we said before to start the podcast, but in case you missed it, we will be back in case of any emergency. So we get a big signing. Hopefully that'll be the positive why we would do an emergency pod. Hopefully nothing negative, but if something negative does happen that does impact the Colts, we will be back. So make sure you're subscribing on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Also, wherever you do get your pods as well. If it's a quiet off season and nothing really happens, we'll be back right before training camp. Going to give you a little training camp preview, what we're watching, position battles you should keep an eye on for. And then we'll be just George, full season, hit the ground running, ready to go. Breakdown. George will be at every training camp practice. So we give the latest on what is going down as the Colts get ready for a big 2024 here. Bare minimum playoff push, also division push as well. So a big training camp upcoming for a big season. So if we don't talk to you between now and training camp, have a great summer. Enjoy it. Get some vacation, get some rest, have some fun. And we'll talk to you late July right here. Where else? the Blue Horseshoe Pod.